So I thought I would read some scary stories because during this Spooktober, I am reading Frankenstein on my Discord. Um, and we're doing a lovely little book club with that. And it was my idea to do that streaming, but as it's an entire book and people might come like midway through, they might get a little bit annoyed. Um, do you know what? My head is not with me. I'm not wearing a choker. So why do I feel like I'm naked or something? There we go. So it is instead that I'm reading creepypastas to you. And it is in true creepypasta fashion that I am reading the uh, creepypastas in the dark from my phone. And I would just like to preface this with that I've never read these before, but they have been submitted by some of you, and so really it's kind of your fault if they aren't good. So let's get to the first one. Summer May, you have just used the emoji for the oni, which is a type of, it's basically like an ogre, like a Japanese ogre. We will be reading Hobo Heart Stitches creepypasta, submitted to me by a friend, and it is on DeviantArt. I will post all the links to the creepypastas I've read when I save this video as like a VOD or whatever you call it on YouTube. Hobo Heart Stitches. It was a winter afternoon. Like most winter afternoons, it was overcast, cloudy with a bit of rain. The wind blew and the leaves rustled on the sidewalk as CC and her friend Elizabeth walked home from school. It was nice walking this way for a change, CC said as the two strode along. Elizabeth smiled. Thanks for joining me this way. I can't believe Brittany didn't show again today. She didn't call or anything. CC rolled her eyes. She probably skipped and went to the lake with Glenn. Elizabeth laughed. You're probably right. All right, well, I'll see you tomorrow. The two parted ways and CC continued. She just had a few more blocks until she was home. As she walked along, she saw a small, scruffy dog pawing at something in the gutter. Hey, little guy, what you after? She crouched down and saw a bone stuck in a crack. CC pried it loose, and the dog snatched it up and darted away towards the alley. The girl followed. Hey, don't I at least get to pet you? When she turned the corner, she saw the dog chewing on the bone at the feet of a boy sitting on a milk crate. He was wearing a grey hoodie and dirty jeans. He was tall and lanky with white hair, crystal blue eyes, and a skull that seemed to be painted on his face. Well, hello, CC said, a little surprised. Is he your dog? The boy looked at CC with a puzzled expression. Yes. CC smiled. Can I pet him? Still confused, the boy looked at CC. closely. Sure. Are you not sad? Cece giggled as she pet the dog. Why would I be sad? I don't know. Everyone I meet is sad, replied the boy. Cece frowned. Well, that's horrible. Maybe if you didn't have a skull on your face, people would be in better mood around you. It's a little late for Halloween, you know. The boy shrugged. I can't help it. It's part of me. I've never met anyone that's been happy before. Cece turned to look at the boy's face so she could inspect the skull. She reached out and placed a timid hand upon his cheek. She attempted to smear what she thought had been paint, but realized that it was his skin. She quickly dismissed the skull when her eyes met his. They were bright blue and appeared to illuminate at certain angles. She became disorientated and then had to shake her head to clear her thoughts. She fumbled and stuttered for words. Your eyes, name, yeah, what's your name? The boy smiled. I don't think I have a name. I'm a Gamberling. A what? She replied. A Gamberling. I was created to serve a purpose, replied the boy. What purpose? Cece inquired with a puzzled look. I don't think you'd want to know, he said, as his eyes seemed to dim. Okay. So what do people call you? Cece asked, becoming more confused. The only person who's ever called me anything was my creator, and he only calls me I don't know how. I think they've spelled it differently. Yeah, they did. Okay, they spelled it differently. Now they're calling it Gimberling. Gimberling, he said with hesitation. That makes me sad. Do you need a name? Cece said, before being interrupted by the boy. No, as he reached out and grabbed her arm. Never be sad. My heart couldn't take it. Cece was startled. Why couldn't your heart take it? You just met me. You're special. Your heart is special. My heart has no place to call home, and you have made it feel something. It's never felt anything before, the boy said. Hobo heart, Cece said with a smile. Huh? The boy asked, confused. That's your name. The boy whose heart has no home. Hobo heart, Cece explained. And now that you have a name, you and I can be friends. The boy smiled. Yes, I like it. My name, Hobo Heart. Okay, well, I have to get home. You'll be here tomorrow so I can see you, right? Asked Cece. Yes, of course, said Hobo Heart with a smile. Cece continued her walk home, but before looking over her shoulder one last time to inspect Cece continued her walk home, but not before looking over her shoulder one last time to inspect the mysterious boy. Oh, bye, Mary. Take care. The next day, Cece came to the alley to see Hobo. When she rounded the corner, he was sitting there on his milk crate. He looked up and saw her. His heartbeat began to quicken. You actually came back? He asked with a smile. Well, of course I did, silly. Now let's go do something besides sit in this alley, Cece said as she blushed. What could we do? Asked Hobo. Well, I don't know. Anything is better than sitting here, Cece said, pulling at Hobo's sleeve. I know, let's go to the park. Hobo followed. Will there be people there? I'm sure, Cece said, laughing. Hobo followed reluctantly as he pulled his hood closer to his face. The scruffy dog picked up a bone and chased after them. When the two arrived at the park, it was full of people running about, playing football, throwing frisbees, and playing on the equipment. The two walked over to the swings. "So, what's your story?" Cece asked. "I don't have a story. I have a purpose. It's all I know," Hobo answered. "Well, what's this purpose you keep mentioning?" Hobo looked at the ground and kicked a rock. "I have duties I have to take care of to prevent something bad from happening." "What do you mean?" Cece asked. Hobo shook his head. "I don't want to talk about it." And as the two talked, Cece looked up and noticed most of the people had left the park, and it was very quiet. The people that were still there were by themselves. He looked around. "I need to be going." "Wait, do I get to see you tomorrow?" Cece asked. "No," Hobo said. "There's something I have to do." "Okay, how about the next day?" she smiled as she asked. Hobo reached out and touched her blonde hair. "If that's what you'd like." She took his hand and touched it to her face. "It is." 2 days passed, just as he had said he met with her. They decided to go for a walk to a nearby lake. The two spent several days like this, just talking, laughing, and enjoying being in one another's company. Time seemed to slip away as the two grew closer together. One day after school, when she arrived at their usual meeting place, Hobo revealed that he had a surprise for her. He held out his hand and she took it. "Hey, wait, before we go, I want to give this to you," Cece said as she reached into her pocket. "Valentine's Day is coming up, and I was wondering if you'd be my Valentine." She handed Hobo a small envelope. "What's a Valentine?" Hobo asked as he opened the envelope. It was a hand-drawn picture of 2 hearts intertwined with the words "Be mine" above the drawing. "If you value your heart, you'll give it to me," written below. A Valentine is someone you care for and would be willing to give your heart to because you know they'll protect it and care for you, she explained. "So, on Valentine's Day, you want me to give you my heart?" Hobo asked. "Well, only if you want to, you know." "Deal," Hobo said as he hugged Cece. "Now let's get going. You're gonna love this." The two headed out towards the country, near the outskirts of town, and the small dog followed, as always wagging his tail. After walking a while in the woods, Hobo made Cece close her eyes. He took her hand and led the way for a few minutes, then stopped. "Okay, look," he said with joy. When she opened her eyes, before her was a massive tree on a hill. It was very old, and its many branches twisted and curved in dozens of different directions. The leaves were lush and bright, unlike the trees surrounding it. The trunk was easily 15 feet in diameter. It was unlike any tree she had ever seen. The roots were more exposed than normal trees. They seemed to come from different points in the ground, almost like the tree was composed of several different trees, whose roots had grown together and had become entangled and formed one massive tree. "It's so beautiful," It seems very special, almost magical, Cece said in wonderment as she gazed at the tree. Cece stepped closer to Hobo. She lifted his hood up off his head and ran her fingers through his hair. His eyes widened as she moved in closer to kiss him. He pulled away. "What's wrong? Haven't you ever kissed a girl before?" Cece asked as she smiled. "No," Hobo replied. "Can I be your first?" she asked. Hobo shook his head. It says Hobo shook his head, yes. Yes. She moved closer. Hobo embraced her, and she kissed him. After the kiss, Hobo gathered himself and pointed to the tree. "This is my purpose, to bring nourishment to the tree." As Hobo spoke, the scruffy dog ran towards the tree and disappeared into the extravagant root system. "Oh, your purpose?" she asked with a puzzled look. "Yes, I live here and take care of the tree," Hobo replied. Then why are you always in the alley?" Cece asked. "I wait there to gather what the tree requires," Hobo said sharply. "So you actually live in the tree?" she inquired. "Yes," he answered. "I want to see your home," she asked, walking closer to the tree. Hobo shook his head. "No, not yet. You're not ready for that." "Can I touch the tree?" Cece asked with an inquisitive tone as she reached her hand out. Hobo turned to her with a scowl and grabbed her hand away from the tree. "No, you must not touch it. You're not prepared for what it will show you." Cece became nervous. "Well, it's getting dark, so I should be heading home soon." Hobo took her hand. "Very well, I'll walk you back to town." As the two approached the small town, a group of people were walking on the edge of the woods with flashlights. The group neared the couple. "Cece, is that you?" a voice called out. "Yes," Cece replied. "It's Elizabeth. Where the hell have you been?" Cece's friend asked frantically. Cece stumbled for words as Hobo backed out of the light and into the shadows. I've been with my friend." "You've been avoiding us at school, and you're too preoccupied to speak to your friends. Do you realize that Brittany has been missing for weeks, and now Glenn's gone missing too?" Elizabeth shouted. "What? Are you serious? What do you mean they are missing?" She looked in the trees and the shadows and couldn't see Hobo. Her head became heavy and could barely stand as she reached out for her friend to hold her up before she fell. "Come on, you can stay at my house tonight," Elizabeth said. "Yeah, okay," Cece replied. The two spent the next day catching up and posting flyers to help the search for Brittany and Glenn. As they returned to Elizabeth's house in the afternoon, Cece became dizzy and ill again. "I think I'm going to lie down for a while, if that's okay," Cece said as her head spun. "Yeah, sure, crash in my room," Elizabeth said. "Hey, don't let me sleep too long. I need to go into town and meet with someone," Cece said as she headed upstairs. Yeah, lover boy, I'm sure," Elizabeth said as she rolled her eyes. Later, Cece woke up in a cold sweat. She frantically looked outside. It was nighttime. "Oh no, no. She got up and ran into Elizabeth's living room. Elizabeth was lying on the couch asleep. Cece shook Elizabeth. Hey, wake up. What time it is? What time is it? Hey, chill out. I don't know. Look at my phone, Elizabeth said, half asleep. Cece fumbled around in the dark to find her phone. It was 11:34. Oh no, I need to go find him, Cece said, starting to tremble. Hey, look, whoever this guy is, he's no good for you. You've been slacking at school when you're there. Your parents are worried. Only God knows what's happened to Brittany and Glenn, and you didn't even care. You've totally lost yourself because of some guy. Spend a little time away from him and see how you feel. Elizabeth scolded. Cece hung her head. Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I got a little carried away. As the days passed, Cece attended school and hung out with her friends. Elizabeth repeatedly bugged her about a boy named Jim that had a crush on her. Cece finally gave in and said she would go on a date with Jim if Elizabeth and her boyfriend joined them. The day of the date came. She met with her friends at a local restaurant. Jim seemed nice enough, kind of a jock, and a little more aggressive than guys she had gone on dates with before. Things went well enough. When they went outside to leave, Jim offered to give her a ride home. She didn't feel comfortable with it and asked Elizabeth and her boyfriend Mike to give her a ride home. The next day at school, Cece opened her locker and a piece of paper fell out. She picked it up and looked at it. It was the valentine she had made for Hobo. When she touched it, flashes of Hobo and memories of time spent with him ran through her mind. She started to panic, and her palms became sweaty. She looked around frantically. How did it get there, she wondered. Right then, Elizabeth walked up. Hey, you okay? She asked. You look like you've seen a ghost, Elizabeth said. Yeah, I just need to let loose a little. I'm stressing, Cece said as she rubbed her forehead. Over that guy, Elizabeth said. You need to quit worrying about that guy. He seems a little creepy anyway. It's Friday night and my parents are out of town. I bet Mike can get us some booze, and we can invite Jim over. How's that sound? Cece giggled and nodded her head. Let's do it. Later that night, the four met at Elizabeth's house. Her parents left some cash for pizza. They'd had a few beers when Mike suggested a game of truth or dare. A beer or two later, Cece had loosened up, and when she was dared to make out with Jim, it didn't seem like such a bad idea. Jim led her upstairs when they started making out on Elizabeth's bed. As Jim ran his hand up Cece's shirt, a dog began barking outside. Jesus Christ, what's with Elizabeth's damn dog? Jim sighed. Elizabeth doesn't have a dog, Cece replied, as she peeped out the window. A chill ran up her spine as she saw the little scruffy dog that always accompanied Hobo, jumping about and barking. Cece ran downstairs and opened the door. She walked around the side of the house and the dog was gone. She scanned the yard and street and saw nothing. When she came back inside, she told Elizabeth she needed to call it a night. Come on, stay a little while longer, Jim begged. No, I need to get going, Cece said. All right, need me to give you a ride home, Jim offered. Are you okay to drive? She asked. Yeah, I'm fine. I do it all the time, Jim replied with a cocky smile. All right then, let's go, Cece shrugged. On the drive home, Jim was paying more attention to Cece than the road. He grabbed at her thigh. Keep your eyes on the road, she yelled as she pushed his hands away. Jim looked back at the road just in time to swerve and miss a parked car. Shaken, Cece said, "That's it. Pull over. I'll walk the rest of the way home." Jim locked the brakes. "Fine. Be a bitch about it." Cece got out of the car and slammed the door. "What an asshole." Jim sped off. As she began to walk the rest of the way home, she pulled her jacket closer as the cold night air nipped at her cheeks. A few houses from home, she heard rustling in the leaves behind her. She quickened her pace. She looked over her shoulder. Maybe she'd been watching too many scary movies, but it felt like somebody was watching her. When she reached home and quickly unlocked the door and slipped inside, breathing heavily, she locked the door behind her. She felt a hand brush her shoulder. "Everything okay, honey?" her dad asked as he jumped. "Yeah, Dad, just a long night. I'm off to bed." She shook her head. The next morning, Cece was awoken by Elizabeth plopping down on her bed. "Happy Valentine's Day," she said annoyingly. Cece peeked out from underneath her blankets. "What time is it?" "Time to get your ass up. We're going shopping. We have to get outfits for tonight. We're going to the movies with the guys," Elizabeth shouted. "I'm not going if Jim is going to be there. He almost got us killed last night. I don't want to be around him," Cece said. "Oh, stop. He was just drunk. Get over it," Elizabeth pleaded. The girls got to the mall. As they went from store to store, Elizabeth started to notice how melancholy everyone seemed. "Shouldn't everyone be in a better mood? It's Valentine's Day." "Geez," Elizabeth said, looking around her. "Yeah, I noticed that too," Cece said as she scanned the crowd. The two finished their shopping and headed to the parking garage. Elizabeth opened the trunk and placed their bags inside as she carried on about the plans for the night. Mid-sentence, Elizabeth stopped talking. Cece asked what was wrong and turned to look at her. Elizabeth stood still, staring at the ground as she began to sob. "Hey, what's wrong?" Cece asked as she grabbed her hand. Her hand felt cold, and her eyes were fixed on the ground. Elizabeth was completely unresponsive. She just stood there sobbing. Just then she felt something touch her leg. As she looked down, she saw the small, scruffy dog with a bone in its mouth. She quickly looked up, and Hobo was standing there. "Have you been following me?" she asked. "I sent him to watch over you." Hobo nodded towards the dog. "I don't need to be watched over. What's wrong with Elizabeth? Are you doing this to her?" Cece had become irritated. "I don't mean to. I told you everyone is sad," Hobo said as his shoulders sank. "You need to go," Cece shouted. "You need to go," Cece shouted as she pushed Hobo away. It's your Valentine's Day. I thought I was to give you my heart," Hobo asked. "No, not anymore. You're not like me. You can't be with me. You need to go," Cece implored as she began to cry. Hobo turned and walked away. The dog followed. As the pair exited out of sight, Cece noticed the dog had left its bone. Upon closer inspection, the bone appeared to have fresh blood on it. Cece knelt down to get a closer look. Elizabeth startled her. "What the hell is that? Are you ready to go or what?" Cece stood up and examined Elizabeth's face. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, why wouldn't I be okay?" Elizabeth asked as she chuckled and closed the trunk. "Let's go." "Yeah, okay." Cece got into the car and glanced around one last time. Later that night, the girls arrived at the movie theater to catch a movie with Mike and Jim. As the girls pulled in, Cece saw the guys standing next to Jim's car. As Cece exited the car, Jim placed his hand on her shoulder. You okay? I'm sorry about last night. I shouldn't have been driving. It was stupid. Cece nodded her head. Well, at least he apologized, she thought to herself. The group went to see some cheesy horror movie. She sat with Jim. He was being a creep and kept trying to make out. She repeatedly denied his advances. After the movie ended, Elizabeth and Mike walked over to Cece and Jim. Hey, Jim, can you give Cece a ride home? We've got other plans, not enough room in the car, Elizabeth winked. Hey, guys, no. Can I just ride with you and you can drop me off at my place? Cece pleaded. Nope, Jim's a big boy. He can handle you. Elizabeth skipped off. Jim chuckled. Hey, come on. I'm not so bad. Cece rolled her eyes. Please just take me home. Jim opened the car door. Ladies first. Cece reluctantly got in the car. She didn't talk much as they traveled along. She noticed that they had missed her turn. Jim had driven them to a park near Cece's neighborhood and parked the car and turned off the lights. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to take me home, Cece said in disgust. Ah, come on, just one kiss. You didn't have a problem with it the other night, Jim said with a sinister grin as he leaned near her. Cece slapped Jim in the face and got out the car and started to run. Jim chased after her. He caught up to her and tackled her. She started to scream. Jim struck her repeatedly and told her to shut up. Her lip and nose started to bleed. He then ripped her shirt and pawed and groped at her body. This really should have probably had a trigger warning. Sorry, content warning. Okay. He then ripped her shirt and pawed and groped at her body. She closed her eyes in terror as she frantically tried to fight him off. She heard a loud crack. Jim had stopped. She opened her eyes and saw Jim lying on the ground and a tall, lanky figure standing over her. He took his hoodie off and put it on her. Her vision was blurry, eyes swollen from being hit. His skin was a dark gray, almost black, and he had a skeletal system on his arms and chest to match the skull on his face. It was Hobo. He knelt down next to her. She couldn't hear clearly what he was doing, but she could hear ripping and tearing of flesh and the horrible sound of blood splattering. She pulled herself to her knees and called out, Hobo. He reached out and handed her something. She took it. She then realized it was his still beating heart pulsating in her hands. She looked up at him. He placed his hands on either side of her face and tilted her head up and said, I value my heart. You can keep it. I don't need it anymore. And kissed her on the forehead. She passed out. Cece woke up in her bed. She got up, went to the mirror. She had no injuries. She looked herself over and could see no damage from the night before. What had happened? Was she dreaming? Her mother was cooking breakfast for her and her father was reading the paper. Mom? Dad? Her dad looked over. Hey, you, how was last night? What do you mean? Cece asked. Well, Elizabeth's mom called this morning. Apparently she didn't make it home last night after she dropped you off. We saw on the news that some more kids were missing. Didn't know if you knew anything about it. We figured it was just kids being kids. You don't know anything, do you? Her father asked, looking up from his paper. No, Cece replied. Cece's heart sank. She ran upstairs and started looking through her room, in her closet, in her drawers. She sat down on her bed. Then she heard it. Thump, 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 thump. She looked under her bed. It was Hobo's hoodie. She pulled it out from underneath her bed and unfolded it. Inside was Hobo's heart, still beating. Oh no, she thought. Hobo, what has happened? I need to find him. She folded the hoodie back up, put some shoes, and ran downstairs. She told her parents she was going to check on Elizabeth, and she'd be home soon. Carrying the hoodie, she ran across the town towards the woods. The wind picked up, and it started to rain. She got near to the spot where Hobo made her close her eyes. She began to call out for him. Hobo! Hobo! It was raining hard now. She looked all around. She saw Hobo's dog running through the woods. She called out to him. He looked up and saw her and darted over and began licking her. He was covered in blood. She fell to her knees. Oh no, Hobo's hurt. Take me to him. The scruffy dog jumped and twirled around. Cece got to her feet and followed the little dog to the tree. The tree was no longer vibrant and full of color. It was black and looked to be dying. All the leaves had fallen off the limbs, were lifeless and low-hanging. The dog went around the back of the hill. Cece could see an opening. She ducked down and started to walk in. She stumbled and reached out to grab the roots to break her fall. When she touched the tree, her heart was filled with great sorrow. She saw flashes in her mind of faces upon faces of lifeless people, dead people. Then 6 faces appeared, horrible faces, twisted and demonic. She managed to get back to her knees and crawl into the hole. It was a circular room. It was dimly lit by 6 braziers. The flames in the braziers were black and purple, unlike any fire Cece had seen before. There were bones strung out across the ground. The ground itself was pooled by blood. She frantically looked around and saw Brittany, Glenn, Jim, Elizabeth, and Mike entangled in the roots. She screamed and ran towards her friends. When she approached, she retched as she realized it was far too late. It was like the roots had come to life and were squeezing the bodies, and bones were cracking and breaking. Their innards were spilling forth. The small dog was ripping at an opening in Elizabeth's chest, pulled a bone loose, and began to shake it about like a toy as he bounced across the room. Long, stringy roots hung down above each of Cece's friends. Their hearts had been removed and now hung above them, intertwined in the roots. It looked like the tree was almost feeding off the hearts, absorbing the life of each soul into the tree. There was a 6th cluster of roots, with no body and no heart. Next to the empty cluster of roots lay Hobo. He lay lifeless and still. Cece crawled through the horrors and carnage to get to him. She rolled him over. His chest was torn open and there was a gaping wound where he had removed his heart. His eyes fluttered open and met hers. He blinked, and his eyes got wider. "Why?" he asked. Cece began to cry. "Why what? Why did you kill my friends? How could you do this? You're a monster," she screamed. Hobo, struggling for life. "I saved you. Protected you from these people. I told you not to touch the tree. You were special. Shouldn't have brought my heart here. I failed my purpose." Cece pounded on Hobo's chest. What purpose? Murdering people? Destroying lives? Cryptic chanting in a foreign tongue began echoing from the walls. Po muen passe liam tomnen map remse. The voices called repeatedly. Hobo cleared his throat and clung to life. Must keep the 6 here. With 6 hearts, only 5 gathered. Saved you. Didn't get 6. Too late. Cece grabbed the hoodie. Use your heart. Give them your heart. She unwrapped the hoodie. Hobo's heart was barely beating. It was black and dying. Hobo looked at his heart, and his rage began to build. He looked into Cece's eyes. I valued it, so I gave it to you. You were supposed to protect it. Now you wish to destroy it? Cece became enraged. You murdered my friends. Hobo's arm shot up and palmed Cece's chest. His fingers and thumb penetrated her skin. Do you value your heart? He demanded. He squeezed his hand into a fist, ripping her shirt and flesh from her body. She fell to the ground, gasping for air. The chanting grew louder. As Hobo rose to his feet, he arched his back, and large black feathered wings extended from his body. His eyes glowed fiercely. Then he used his fist to crush Cece's chest as he struck her repeatedly. Then he grabbed a protruding rib bone and ripped it from her body, exposing her chest cavity. She lay motionless as he reached inside of her and removed her heart. The roots from the ceiling extended to receive the heart. Hobo looked up to the roots, then back at Cece. No, he placed Cece's heart into the opening in his own chest. He found a small sliver of bone from the ground, took a hair from Cece's head, and began to sew himself back together. The small blood-soaked dog whimpered at his side as he forced the crude bone in and out of his flesh. Don't worry, it'll do for now, though it won't last. It will need to be replaced. When he was done, he pat the dog on the head, walked over and picked up his heart, and placed it on Cece's chest. You can keep it. I don't need it anymore. He knelt down and kissed her on the forehead one last time. As he stood up, he noticed something laying on the ground beside her. It was the valentine she had made for him. He picked it up and held it to his chest, then placed it back in his back pocket. Hobo then turned the 6 braziers over and set the room ablaze. The room was quickly engulfed in flame. The fire burned unnaturally fast as the purple and black flames reached higher. Hobo then exited the opening in the hill. As he walked away, 6 skeletal figures composed of black smoke crawled up out of the roots and flames, screeching and screaming as they cackled. At last we are free. Hobo grinned as he walked away, the tree burning fiercely despite the rain. At the end of this creepypasta, any thoughts? I mean, I feel like there could have been several different writers to this, and or just that they had an idea and everyone was like, yeah, do that, put that in there, because suddenly Hobo is growing wings and all. I don't know. This is the first time I've read a creepypasta. I have heard a few of them before. There's a podcast I listen to that reads them out sometimes. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe I can't get into horror stories, but I'm just like, okay, but when's the bad thing happening? But when's the bad thing happening though? But when does the when is she gonna die? Like, there's all of this time, like I thought she's gonna die in a car crash. Hobo's gonna make the car crash. Like, I don't know. I guess I am trying not to. Um, I feel like expecting the bad thing happens. Expecting the bad thing to happen, kind of like it's like when somebody's like, "Oh, guess how much this was," and then you guess like higher than the thing, um, and then it's like, oh. Oh, you had pasta and pasta whilst watching. Oh, hi, Kay. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone who is watching. That was my first creepypasta. That was quite long. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm gonna take a little drink. Oh, I see. Bry, as keeping in mind that I don't like horror, and when he chose this, yeah, I mean, I feel like what I don't like about horror, I think I don't like horror films. Hi Tickle. I don't like horror films because there's just too many jump scares, and I feel that that really cheapens a lot of actually fascinating stories. Um, say hi to Yuki for me, please, Kay. So I guess I just don't enjoy horror films. Horror stories are kind of okay, but I have to be in the um right space. Like, I moved into a very creepy old house, and at that point, I was in the middle of reading The Shining, and I was like, no, I'm gonna have to stop reading this now, because I am now living it. Hi, Piggly Wiggly. Um, so yeah, I think if it's like something that's never gonna happen to me, then I'm kind of like more okay with it. But that doesn't mean that you can start sending me like really scary stuff, because I don't know about that. And definitely it's kind of like more visual stuff is creeping me out. Um, so if I watched this, I may be more scared. But let's pick another one, shall we? What else have we got here that was sent? Oh, he's only gone and sent me another one. Thank you very much for the likes. Please consider liking this. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe and all of that wonderful stuff. That would be lovely. Okay. Yeah, I did ask for more. Is it the one called Smile Dog that you want me to read? Okay, I see. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of. Okay. Okay, so this is a story called Smile Dog, and it was posted on April 28th, 2010. I am reading it from creepypasta.com. I first met in person. Wait, one moment. Where is it? Okay. I first met in person with Mary E. in the summer of 2007. I had arranged with her husband of 15 years, Terence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed, since I was not a newsman, but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few early college assignments, and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago on unrelated business. But at the last moment, Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom, refusing to meet with me. For half an hour I sat with Terence as we camped outside the bedroom door. I listening and taking notes, while he attempted fruitlessly to calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense, but fit with the pattern I was expecting. Though I could not see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying, and more often than not her objections to speaking with me centered around an incoherent diatribe on her dreams, her nightmares. Terence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in stride. Recall that I wasn't a reporter in search of a story, but merely a curious young man in search of information. Besides, I thought at the time, I could perhaps find another similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the CISOP for a small Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992 when she first encountered smile.jpg, and her life changed forever. She and Terence had only been married for 5 months. Mary was one of an estimated 400 people who saw the image when it was posted as a hyperlink on the BBS, though she is the only one who has spoken openly about the experience. The rest have remained anonymous, or are perhaps dead. In 2005, when I was only in 10th grade, smile.jpg was first brought to my attention by my burgeoning interest in web-based phenomena. Mary was the most often cited victim of what is sometimes referred to as smile.dog. The being smile.jpg is reputed to display. What caught my interest, other than the obvious macabre elements of the cyber legend and my proclivity towards such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point that people didn't believe it even exists, other than as a rumor or hoax. It is unique because Though the entire phenomenon centers on a picture file, that file is nowhere to be found on the internet. Certainly, many photo-manipulated simulacra litter the web, showing up with most frequency on sites such as imageboard 4chan, particularly in the /x/focus paranormal subword. It is suspected that these are fakes because they do not have the effect the true smile.jpg is believed to have, namely sudden onset temporary lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. This purported reaction in the viewers is one of the reasons the phantom-like smile.jpg is regarded with such disdain, since it is patently absurd, though depending on whom you ask, the reluctant to acknowledge smile.jpg's existence might be just as much of a fear as of a disbelief. Neither smile.jpg nor smile.dog is mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia, although the website features articles on such other and perhaps more scandalous shock sites as, in brackets, hello.jpg or 2 girls 1 cup, and any attempt to create a page pertaining to smile.jpg is summarily deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with smile.jpg are the stuff of internet legend. Mary E's story is not unique, and there are unverified rumors of smile.jpg showing up in the early days of Usenet, and even one persistent tale in 2002 a hacker flooded the forums of humor and satire website Something Awful with a deluge of smile.dog pictures, rendering almost half the forum's users at the time epileptic. It is also said that in the mid to late 90s that smile.jpg circulated on Usenet and as an attachment of a chain email with the subject line, "Smile, God loves you." Yet despite the huge exposure these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of this file or any link has ever been discovered. Those who claim to have seen smile.jpg often weakly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the picture to their hard drive. However, all alleged victims offer the same description of the photo. A dog-like creature, usually described as appearing similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of a camera, sits in a dim room. The only background detail is visible of being a human hand extended from the darkness near the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but usually described as beckoning. Of course, most attention is given to the dog or dog creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they claim to have seen. The muzzle of the dog is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing 2 rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth. This is, of course, not a description given immediately after viewing the picture, but rather a recollection of the victims who claim to have seen the picture, endlessly repeating in their mind's eye during the time they are, in reality, having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue indeterminately, often while the victims sleep, resulting in very vivid and disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though some says it is more effective than others. Mary E., I assumed, was not on effective medication. That's why, after my visit to her apartment in 2007, I sent out feelers to every folklore and urban legend-orientated newsgroups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of a supposed victim of Smile.jpg who felt more interested in talking about his experience. For a length of time, nothing happened. For a time, nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuits, since I had begun my freshman year of college and was quite busy. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008. Dear Mr. L., I am incredibly sorry about my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours, but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realize that I could have handled the situation more decorously. However, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years I have been haunted by Smile.jpg, Smile.dog. It comes to me in my sleep every night. I know that sounds silly, but it is true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that makes them completely unlike any real dreams I have ever had. I do not move. I do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing ahead of me is the scene from that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand, and I see Smile.dog. It talks to me. It is not a dog, of course, though I am not quite sure what it really is. It tells me it will leave me alone only if I do as it asks. And I must do, it says, is spread the word. That is how it phrases its demands. And I know exactly what it means. It wants me to show it to someone else. I swear, Bri, if this image is at the bottom of this, I'm going to be very annoyed at you. And I could, the week after my incident, I received the mail. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3.5-inch floppy diskette. Without having to check, I knew precisely what was on it. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a co-worker. I could even show it to Terence. As much as the idea disgusted me. And what would happen then? Well, if Smile.dog kept its words, I could sleep. Yet if it lied, what would I do? And who was I to say something worse would not come to me if I did as the creature asked? So I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile.dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims on the BBS board where I first encountered Smile.jpg stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. They are the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Mr. L., but last summer when you contacted me and my husband about the interview, I was near breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I did not care if Smile.dog was lying or not. I wanted it to end. You were a stranger, someone I had no connection with, and I thought I would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette as part of your research and sealed your fate. Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought, and in fact I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L., and I hope this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of Smile.jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved, someone who will not hesitate to follow Smile.dog's orders. Stop while you are still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Terence contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had killed herself. While clearing up the various things she'd left behind, closing email accounts and the like, he happened upon the above message. He was a man in shambles. He wept as he told me to listen to his wife's advice. He found the diskette, he revealed, and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that most disturbed him, however, was how the diskette has hissed as it melted, like some sort of animal, he said. I will admit, I was a little uncertain on how to respond to this. At first I thought perhaps it was a joke, with the couple belatedly playing with the situation in order to get a rise out of me. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of suicide in the article. I decided that, for a time at least, I would no further pursue the subject of smile.jpg, especially since I had my finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has an odd way of testing us, and almost a full year after I had returned from my disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email. Hello. I found your email address through a mailing list. Your profile said you are interested in Smile Dog. I have saw it. It is not as bad as everyone says. I have sent it to you here. Just spreading the word, smiley face. The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was one file attached, naturally, smile.jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was mostly likely a fake, I imagined, and even if I weren't, I was never wholly convinced of smile.jpg's particular powers. Mary E.'s account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyway. After all, how could a simple image do what smile.jpg said was to accomplish? What sort of creature was that could break one's mind with only the power of the eye? Bri, I thought that you had seen this, and I told you, if there is a picture at the end of this, I will kill you. I don't want to see. I'm like scrolling like line per line because I'm like, and if such things were patently absurd, then why did the legend exist at all? If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if Smile.dog came to me in my dreams demanding that I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give in until I died? Or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put at rest? And even if I chose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in turn? If I went through with my earlier intention to write a short article about smile.jpg, I decided I could attach it as evidence, and anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest, would be affected. And even assuming smile.jpg attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that matter? Could I spread the word? Yes, I could. Credit anonymous. I'm not scrolling down anymore. I don't want to see any picture. That was the end of that one. That was actually much more scary. And I was like brought back to like, oh gosh. Like, I don't know, 2002 or something. And then like getting those emails that were like, if you do not pass this on to 15 people, your good life is gonna ruin. And like these all of these things, it definitely reminded me of that time. the stupid like pass it on. Mariella, hi. The picture isn't scary. Okay, that's fine. I mean, but you know, like Bri, you know how bad my dreams always are. You know that I have very vivid, very bad dreams, and that I'm going through a spell of like a lot of bad dreams right now. Um yeah, like MySpace messages passes on passes on to 15 people. It's just a doggo. It's just a doggo with some teeth. Yeah, I'm good then. I know what a doggo looks like. I don't want to see this one. I've seen a lot of them before. And the ones that I used to get on emails, and it was like from people who I never spoke to at school. I don't know how everyone just had everyone's email address. I guess like MSN. When people would like send me emails like of this like horror character, and it's like, if you don't pass this on to 15 people in 10 hours, then in 10 days your crush is gonna tell you that you smell like rot, and um everyone's not gonna be your friend anymore. They were like so specific. Jeff the Killer. Okay, well, does anyone else have anyone else is welcome to put into the chat any links to other um creepy pastas? I'll see what other ones I have. Yes, Ben put a story in too. It's not a, I don't think it's a creepypasta. I think it's oh, this is a creepypasta. Thank you very much, Ben. I thought it was just an urban legend. Okay. Um I think I just need a little bit of a break, actually. Just before we move on with more creepiness. I am sitting here in the dark reading them from my phone in a very creepypasta way. Smeagol has gone to sleep. Because I think because the light is off, she's like, is it nighttime in here? But yeah, just gonna take a little bit of a rest. Talking a lot can be very tiring. But I hope you guys are all enjoying it. Hi, Shannon. Why bring up two girls? I know, I don't know why they did that. Just one of those things. It's nice to forget ever existed. Bry says he's just shared smile.jpg like it was nothing. No, don't look at it. Don't look at it. It's just a dog. I actually thought that this was like going to be some like interactive like timed page, like sort of in the way that do you remember that um like the world's first GIF of like that car going like through the countryside and then suddenly like a zombie like pops up. Like I thought that like Smile Dog was just going to like suddenly pop up on the screen whilst I was reading, and I would have to like yeet my phone. Um or I would get up and run away from my phone like I do when I play Morrowind. Is I just run away from my laptop. Um yeah, so I thought it would be like that. Thankfully not. But I did think that you, well, I didn't know. I was like, this actually does seem like something Bri would do to me, to give me to give me a scare. Um, but no, you were a good brother. My gosh. Ugh, creepy, creepy. I feel like I have like dust on my face. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Yes, I really don't like scary stuff. Okay, so all right, guys. This is our third story of the night. And it might possibly be my last, because then I have to get to sleep after this. So, this story is on kombawa.net. Wait, I just it's not called Kombawa. It looks like that. It's Koba Kowa Kowabana. I just read words and I think and I just make it up. Like I like half read the word and I'm like, oh, it looks like that. It's a dyslexic thing. Um that you just assume that the word says that. Anyway, this is by Kowabana. Um and it was posted in October 22nd of 2017, and it's called Hash Hashaku 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 sama. My reading is very much deteriorating, as you can probably tell, so I'm very sorry. My father's parents' house was a little less than 2 hours away by car. It was a farming house, but I liked that sort of thing. So when I started high school and got a bike, I often went on trips there by myself during the summer and winter holidays. Both my grandfather and my grandmother happily welcomed me. "We are so happy that you are here. However, the last time I went there was just before I started third grade of high school, so I haven't been there in over 10 years now. It's not that I won't go, but rather I can't go." It was the start of the spring vacation, and the weather was perfect, so I got on my bike and I went to my grandfather's house. It was still a little cold, but the veranda was pleasantly warm, so I relaxed there for a while. Then, popo, 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 I heard this strange sound. It didn't sound like a machine. It sounded like it was coming from a person. In addition to that, it was kind of like it was both a voiced consonant and a half-voiced at the same time. What was that? I wondered. And then I saw a hat over the top of the garden hedge. There's no reason it would have been put up there. I started to move sideways, and once it reached a gap in the hedge, I saw a woman. Ah, that woman was wearing the hat. She was also wearing a white one-piece dress. However, the hedge was about 2 meters high. If her head could pop out above the top of that, just how tall was she? I was shocked, but she started moving again and disappeared from view. The hat also disappeared. Then, at some point, the po-po-po sound also stopped. At the time, I didn't think much more of it than perhaps an already tall woman wearing some high-soled boots, or perhaps a tall man dressed up as a woman in high heels. Afterwards, I was in the living room, drinking tea, when I told my grandfather and grandmother about what just happened. I saw this really big woman. I wonder if it was a man cross-dressing, I said. They just replied, "Oh yeah?" She was bigger than the hedge. She was wearing a hat and was making a strange sound like po-po-po. The moment I said that, the two of them froze, like they stopped moving the exact same time. After that, my grandfather's face contorted and he threw a barrage of angry questions at me. When did you see her? Where did you see her? How much taller than the hedge was she? I answered his barrage of questions, then he suddenly fell silent and went to the phone in the hallway and called somewhere. The sliding door was closed, so I couldn't hear what he was saying very well. My grandmother was visibly shaken. Having finished his phone call, my grandfather returned. "You'll stay here tonight." "No, there's no way we can let you return tonight," he said. "Have I perhaps done something awful?" I worried, but I couldn't think of anything. It's not like I went to see the woman by myself. She was the one who appeared to me. Then my grandfather said, "Grandma, I'm leaving him to you now. I'm going to pick up Kei-san." He took off in his truck. Timidly I asked my grandmother about it, and she said in a trembling voice, "It seems you've been possessed by Hashaku-sama. Your grandfather's going to do something about it. There's no need to worry." After that, she told me bit by bit until my grandfather returned. In this area was something called Hashaku-sama. Hashaku-sama took on the appearance of a tall woman. Just as her name suggested, she was about 8 shaku feet tall and had a strange manly laugh that went po-po-po-po-po. Manly laugh. Depending on the person, she might appear as a young woman in a morning dress, an old lady in a formal kimono, or even a middle-aged woman in farm clothes. While her appearance was always different, the things she had in common were her incredible height and the fact she always wore something on her head, and her strange laugh. In the past, there were rumors of her being a possessed traveler, but no one knew for sure. She was sealed in this area. Now it's a part of O City, but in the past it was a larger section of X Village by Jizo statues, so she's unable to leave. When you are possessed by Hashaku-sama, you are killed within a few days. The last Hashaku-sama hurt somebody was 15 years ago. I heard this after the fact, but the reason she was sealed in by the Jizo statues was because Hashaku-sama could only leave the village by certain paths. Nobody knows why. And so they enshrined the Jizo statues on those particular paths. They were to prevent her leaving. But apparently they were placed in 4 locations on the boundaries of the east and west, and north and south. As to why they would even try to keep Hashaku-sama trapped there, apparently there was some arrangement with the nearby villages where they got, for example, priority to water rights and such. Hashaku-sama only appeared to bother people once every 10 or so years, so the people who lived there in the past found it to be an advantageous deal. After hearing all that, there was no way it could be real, I thought. Of course not. Before long, my grandfather returned with an old woman in tow. "Well, haven't you gotten yourself into a fine mess? Here, take this," the old lady said, and handed me this talisman. Then she went upstairs with my grandfather to do something. My grandmother stayed behind with me. Even when I went to the toilet, she went with me. She wouldn't let me close the door the whole way. For the first time since being there, I started to think maybe this really is dangerous. A short while later, they called me up into the 2nd floor and put me in a room. The windows were entirely covered with newspaper and talismans, and there were piles of salt in all 4 corners. There was a small wooden box, not something you'd really call an altar or anything, and on top of it was a small statue of Buddha. Then, I don't know where they came from, but there were 2 bedpans prepared as well. I was supposed to go in those? "The sun is about to set. Listen, you can't leave this room until morning. Neither myself nor your grandmother will call you or try to speak with you, okay? You must under no circumstances leave this room until 7 a.m. tomorrow. At 7 a.m. you can come out by yourself. I'll call and let your parents know," my grandfather said with a serious look on his face. I could do nothing but nod silently in agreement. "Make sure you do exactly as was just said. Keep that talisman close as well. If anything happens, go and pray before the Buddha," Kei-san said. They said it was okay to watch TV, so I turned it on. But even as I watched it, my mind wandered and I couldn't focus. Being locked in the room, I didn't feel like eating the onigiri or snacks my grandmother made for me, so I just got in the futon and lay there trembling. At some point I fell asleep, but when I woke up I don't remember. What it was, but some late-night TV program was on, and when I turned to look at my watch, it was past 1 a.m. At this time, I didn't have a cell phone. Ugh, what an awful time to wake up, I thought. Then I heard something tapping at the window glass. It was like a small rock hitting it. It was more like a finger rapping across the surface. I couldn't decide whether the wind could make a sound like that, or if it really was a person tapping at the window, so I tried to believe with all my might that it really was just the wind. Then I heard my grandfather's voice. "Hey, are you okay? Don't push yourself too hard if you're scared, okay?" Without thinking, I walked towards the door, but then I remembered what my grandfather said to me. "What's wrong? You can come out if you want." The voice sounded exactly like my grandfather, but it wasn't him. I don't know why, but I just knew. And as I realized that, I got goosebumps. I looked over at the pile of salt in the corner, and the top had turned black. I ran at full speed to the Buddha and sat down in front of it. Grasping at the talisman, I started to pray as hard as I could. "Please help me." Then, "Popo, popo, po, popo." I heard the voice, and the window started rapping. Ton ton, ton ton. I knew she wasn't that tall, but I couldn't stop picturing her in my mind reaching up from below and tapping on the window. There was nothing I could do but keep praying in front of the Buddha. The night felt unbelievably long, but eventually morning came, and at some point the TV had been that had been left on started playing the morning news. The time in the corner of the screen said 7:13 a.m. I hadn't even noticed, but both the tapping on the glass and the voice had stopped. It seemed I'd either fallen asleep or lost consciousness. The pile of salt had turned even more black. Just in case, I looked at my own watch, and it said roughly the same time, so I nervously opened the door, and my grandmother and Kei-san were standing there looking worried. My grandmother was crying. I'm so glad, I'm so glad. When I went downstairs, my father was also there. My grandfather appeared from outside and told me to hurry up and get in the car. I don't know where it came from, but when I went into the garden, there was a minivan there. There was also several men standing in the garden. The van fit 9 people. I was put in the middle seat. Kei-san sat in the passenger seat, and the rest of the men in the garden got in and surrounded me. There were 9 of us in total. I was surrounded in all directions. It's terrible, isn't it? You'll probably be curious, but I want you to close your eyes and keep your head down. We won't be able to see anything, but perhaps you will. Until we say it's okay, just keep your eyes shut. An old man in his 50s, sitting to my right, said to me. Then my grandfather got in his mini truck to take the lead, followed by the van I was in. My father followed in his car as we set off. The line of cars drove rather slowly. They probably weren't even going over 20 kilometers an hour. Before long, Kei-san muttered, "This is the hard part," and the men started chanting some sort of Buddhist prayer. Popo, 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 popo. I heard that voice again. I gripped the talisman Kei-san gave me and closed my eyes and put my head down like I was told, but for some reason I opened my eyes just a little to look outside. I saw a white dress. It was moving alongside the car. She was following with such long strides. Hey, her head was outside the window, so I couldn't see it, but she started bobbing her head down like she was trying to see inside the car. Unconsciously, I let out a hee sound. "Don't look!" The man next to me raised his voice. In a panic, I squeezed my eyes shut and gripped the talisman even tighter. Kotsu, kotsu, kotsu. Tapping sound on the window began. The people in the car around me also gasped in fear. Even though they couldn't see her or hear her voice, they could hear the sound on the window. Kei-san started to pray even harder. Finally, when I thought the voice and sounds had stopped, Kei-san said, "We got away," and the men around me who had been quiet up until this point were relieved and said, "Thank goodness." Soon after, the van stopped on a wide part of road, and I got into my father's car. As my father and grandfather bowed to the other men, Kei-san came over and said, "Show me the talisman." I was unconsciously gripping it, but when I had looked at it, it turned entirely black. Kei-san said, "I think it's all okay now, but just in case, you should keep this for a little while longer," and gave me a new talisman. After that, I returned home with my father. A few days later, my grandfather and one of his neighbors brought my bike back. Apparently, as my father also knew about Hashaku-sama, and he had told me about one of his childhood friends who was possessed by her and then killed. He even knew of people who had to move away and live in other places because of her. The men who rode in the car were all related to my grandfather in some way, which meant they were all very loosely my blood relatives as well. Of course, my grandfather riding in the front and my father riding in the back were connected by blood as well. So they were all meant to confuse Hashaku-sama somewhat from me. My father's brothers, my uncles, were unable to come over in a single night, so they gathered whatever blood relatives they could, no matter how loosely related we were. But of course, it was still impossible to get so many men together so quickly, and thinking it was much safer to leave during day than night, I was imprisoned in that room for the night. In a worst-case scenario, apparently both my grandfather and father were prepared to sacrifice themselves for me as we escaped as well. Now, as I explained above, I make sure not to go back there anymore. After I returned home, I spoke to my grandfather on the phone and asked him if he had spoke to me on that night. He said he didn't. He said that he didn't. So it really was. I got chills down my spine thinking about it again. Hashaku-sama targeted youths yet to come of age, and children often saw her as well. When youths and children are feeling extremely anxious, they hear the voice of someone from their family. I think they quickly let their guard down. 10 years passed, and just as I was about to forget those events, something terrible happens. The Jizo statues keeping Hashaku-sama in the village broke. It's the one on the road leading towards your house, my grandmother told me over the phone. My grandfather died 2 years earlier, and of course I wasn't able to attend his funeral. Even when my grandfather was no longer able to get out of bed, he said for me not to come. Even now I'm telling myself it's just a superstition, when I find myself getting more and more worried when I think about hearing that po-po-po voice again. The end. I'm sure it's meant to be like po-po-po-po. But I didn't know it was like meant to be a manly laugh, so I was like po-po-po-po. But I enjoyed that one. It was great. Thank you, Kay. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed this evening's spooky stories. I plan to do this like every 2 weeks. I'm thinking about doing a live on YouTube. So hopefully I can do another one on the 29th of October, and we will be doing more spooky stories. So I hope that you join in for that. I hope that you've enjoyed this evening. It is a little bit, are you afraid of the dark? I'm sitting in the dark. This, like, I have like my ring light on. That's like the only light. That's true. Yeah, you guys can watch this. If you guys just came in now, you can watch this from the start. It will be like a VOD. If you would like to support the stream, please, like, I guess, share the video when it turns into a video, and like it and all of these good things. I would really appreciate that. And yeah, tell your friends. Yeah, I will be live tomorrow on the Meet Me app. I have a really lovely community there in my little doll's house, and yeah, a very lovely bunch of people there in my regulars and in my mods. So do come and join us if you haven't before. It's kind of wild in there, I must say, but we try to keep it chill. Thank you very much. I will try to have a good night's sleep, but, well, after this evening, I don't know. I'm going to actually just go and play Animal Crossing, so yeah, maybe I'll have. Maybe I can forget about all of the scary stories I have just read by organizing plants. Thank you, Bri. Yeah, I don't really have any other things. Yeah, all my socials should be in the description. If not, I will put them in the description. And let me know like what other kind of lives you would like to see on YouTube. And yeah, just take care of yourselves and be kind to yourselves. And know that you are loved and appreciated. And take care. Bye bye. Bye bye, everyone.